Obviously, it comes back to what we were talking about around training and regular training, but actually it's probably more than that. It's the day-to-day bread and butter that makes safeguarding a culture within the schools.
Good afternoon, Sally, and thank you for joining us today. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, your school and your role?
Hello everyone, my name is Sally Lah-Anyane and I'm the Assistant Head and Designated Safeguarding Lead at a large primary school in Northampton.
Lovely. And today I thought we'd start by asking you some questions around, what is a day in the life of a DSL at your school?
So that is a really interesting question because, like everybody knows, in a school, no 2 days are the same. And for a DSL, it is exactly that. No 2 days are the same at all. So I'm always prepared to be unprepared, as it were, and to be ready with the challenges. I suppose when I think about my day, I always make sure that I'm up to date with all the current concerns that are going on at my school, and I often have a little list of things that I would like to do at the beginning of the day. So that could be that I might go and seek out some colleagues or support staff in school just on the back of concerns that they've put on. Maybe I've had a little thought about how to support those children best, or next steps that I'd like them to undertake that may be quite time sensitive. Also, it's good to also get your face seen around school and make sure that everyone else is okay as well. I think one of the most important things for me is also to be visible, not just to staff in school, but also parents and pupils as much as possible. So I make sure that I'm out on the playground, so I'm that face that can be seen by parents or friendly face as the pupils come in, and I think that's really important. I generally do an assembly once a week as well, which again adds that visibility, and people then begin to see you not just as a DSL who comes along when there's safeguarding concerns, but as a friendly and approachable member of staff as well. We have a weekly team meeting because there's quite a few DSLs in our school. Although I'm the lead, there's plenty of deputy DSLs as well. And we meet once a week to go through our children that have safeguarding plans, whether that's early help all the way up to child protection. And we look at how they're progressing every week. And we also touch upon those pupils that maybe their names have suddenly cropped up a few more times this week, or unusual cases that we want to explore more, where we talk about who's going to do what, next steps, what's going to help, interventions in place. We know that differs from family to family, and we try to make it a really unique experience for our children. We also have a quick look at any updates for the single central record, things like that, any training needs. And of course, after that, then my to-do list is normally significantly longer. So I will go and crack on with the rest of the day, any meetings and phone calls, and mostly important, lastly, but not by no means by least, I also go and see my own class as well, and make sure that I'm saying hi to them on the days that I'm out of class, and make sure that everything's all right up there as well.
So that's interesting. So you are lead DSL and class teacher, I'm assuming, because you just said a class, and you're an assistant head teacher. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And do you have any other roles as well?
All the things that go with the DSL role. So I'm designated teacher for children in care, mental health lead. I did the training last year, and have recently also taken on PSHE lead, which it fits really nicely with safeguarding, but it's also very big.
So how do you manage, when I was in school, I was lead DSL, I was the head, and there's lots coming at you all the time, isn't it? So how do you prioritize? Because you know, you're assistant head, you're the lead, you're DSL, you're a class teacher. So how do you manage all of that?
Well, it's working really closely with your staff as well, isn't it? And there's that delegation of, I'm not always the best person to do all of these things. I know they need to get done, but who else can do them? And who else can do them better than me sometimes, you know? And having a great team. I work in the classroom not all week, and I work with a really close team who understand that there's a lot of pressures and priorities that come with safeguarding that I can't always predict. So they're really, really helpful. But certainly I'm a big fan of a list, and and I number them and make sure that I cross them off, you know, and prioritize.
No, that's great. And I love that, you know, you delegate, and you are absolutely right. You are not going to be the expert in everything. You know that other people are going to be experts, so you use them. That's really good. Not many people do that, so that's a good thing to have. So part of your role as a DSL is making sure that everyone knows that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, not just the DSLs. So how do you get that message across to your staff?
I think they will tell you that I do it constantly. It is that drip feeding. I think sometimes when I go and sidle up to them in the staff room and sit next to them, they almost have their head in their hands of, oh, I know what's coming next. But it is that drip feeding constantly that creates that school culture. And obviously it starts with training and that regular training. But as we know, people who aren't DSLs don't actually need to have very regular safeguarding training. So it's very easy to say, yep, we've done that. That's done for the next couple of years. But actually, it needs to be that consistent drip feeding. Of course, your September training is always really crucial, but making sure that we have what's called safeguarding snippets that go into our Monday briefings every week. And although I work to a loose timetable that I've devised, obviously if something comes up that's really pertinent, then I shuffle things around so that the snippet is useful for you know, the days going forward. We do quizzes, we do scenarios where you say, well, you know, we sometimes take real concerns and remove all the names and redact it and say, you know, what would you do if that was a situation in your class? And sometimes we use lessons learned to look at and just try to make it a bit more light-hearted, but also at a time where you can actually think about things thoroughly, because as we know, quite often when safeguarding concerns come up, you have to think on your feet, and then afterwards you think, oh, I wish I'd have done that. So bit of safeguarding time in a staff meeting is really valuable to give that reflection time. Obviously, we have those regular day-to-day conversations as well. I like to make sure that I go in the staff room. I find that I hear quite a lot of stuff that I would miss otherwise if I hadn't gone in, and just, you know, really driving home those messages. And of course, it's not just for staff as well. We also try to make sure that our parents are aware of safeguarding being everybody's responsibility. It doesn't just end in your four walls or in the school. So we have regular newsletter sections where we talk about what you can do if you're concerned, who you can get in touch with, who our DSLs are, governors, all those kinds of useful information. Bits that possibly can get missed in translation at the beginning of the year. Those go in regularly. And also we've started to look at making some of our policies more child friendly as well, especially when they're more pertinent to what children understand. So for example, the child on child abuse, bullying, online safety, things like that. Getting rid of all the jargon and writing it in a way that the children can understand, to ensure that also they're playing their part, because quite often what makes me really frustrated is when you're sitting and working through a problem with a group of children and they all knew about it and we didn't, and you say, well, you know, why didn't you speak to someone, why didn't you tell an adult? So trying to make sure that they realise that they can play a part as well is really important.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like the child-friendly policies. You know, we're writing policies about the children, shouldn't we, you know, at least include them so they understand what we're doing to safeguard them. I think that's a great idea. You said that you were a mental health support lead and you've done the training and all of that. So so what do you do? What does your school do to support children with mental health needs and adults with mental health needs within your school?
Well, it's such a vast area, isn't it? And an area that has had a lot of media focus more than ever now. And I think I'm grateful that we're living in a time where it's much more acceptable to talk about things, and actually we're in an age where we have a responsibility to be doing things about mental health and making sure that people have as positive mental health as possible. The most important thing for me in my school is making sure that our relationships with our pupils are really, really strong, because with those good relationships, we can actually spot things before they become bigger. And there's that saying of, it's no good to constantly be pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out what's causing them to fall in the first place. And actually, when we have those relationships, we can spot that things aren't quite right before they get to a really bad point. So that is always the aim. We promote mental health awareness through our PSHE lessons, assemblies. We do protective behaviours work. Specialist weeks and days are obviously really great. Things like Hello Yellow and Mental Health Awareness Week. But actually we need to be drip feeding again all year round. One of the things that we do first in September and then again periodically through the year is we get children to draw around their hand and they choose their 5 trusted adults, and we really encourage them to have a mix of adults at home and adults in school, so that we can always say, well, you know, who's on your hand, who do you want to talk to? Because we always say there's nothing too big or too trivial that you couldn't tell somebody. So it's really making sure that all of that is drip fed alongside promoting strategies to support people's mental health as well, because even when you're having a good day and you don't actually feel that there's an issue with your mental health, making sure that they know that actually those health benefits to getting outside in the fresh air or limiting screen time, regular exercise, all of those things, if they have those strategies up their sleeve, then they've got them to use them should they need. I think adults in school is a slightly harder one, and it's one that sometimes doesn't always get the priority that it should. But I think in our school, it's recognizing the stresses and the strains of the job. You know, actually just recognizing that goes a long way to making someone's feelings feel validated. And of course, it is only a job. People have lives outside of school that come with events that can cause stress or anxiety and concerns, and it's actually just recognizing that as well that can go a long way. We do have a member of staff who organises events to try and foster staff well-being and relationships with one another. So we recently had a lunchtime buffet for the King's Coronation Week, and we have staff socials, all of those things. And then one thing that we introduced last year was supervision. You'll remember that it got raised in keeping children safe, and then it went out again. It's a little bit of the hokey cokey, but we think it's really valuable, and our DSLs all have it. But we also open it up to anyone else who would want to have it as well. And it could be that they have one session and feel that they don't need it again for ages, or it could be that they need a few regular sessions, but really valuable for having that confidential space to discuss cases or your own well-being. But I think it's always something that we could do more in that area, especially around those pinch points in the school year, like when deadlines are looming and report writing is high on the agenda. It always causes that extra stress and anxiety for people.
Yeah. It's good that you offer supervision. Some schools still do not offer it, but it is, you know, yes, DSL should have it 100%. The head teacher should as well. But all the other staff need some sort of supervision as well. And it's very positive to hear that you do it at your school as well. So that's great.
Really good, really good.
Yeah. So if we go back to the children, when we talked previously, you said you do a lot of work on relationships with children when it comes to safeguarding and behaviour. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, like I said, it really does underpin every single area of school life, really. Again, going back to what I said earlier, it's actually just about making yourself visible in the first place so that you're known to the children in a general sense, so that when you're seen around school, it's not just when there's an issue or just when they're in trouble or, oh, you're going to ring my mum or whatever. It's more on a day-to-day basis and making sure that they can see you in different guises. So doing assembly, doing playground duty, so that you're friendly and approachable, and that trust is built up over time. But on an individual level, it's just getting to know people, isn't it? It's the same whether you're a child or an adult. If you know a little bit about how somebody ticks, whether it's strengths, hobbies, siblings, favorite color, favorite cartoon, superhero, all of those things, it's those things that can distract and start a conversation when there is an issue and you do need to step in. And I think one of the other things that I've learned over time is actually the importance of that repair relationship as well. So that if there has been an issue and perhaps there's been a behaviour issue or a child has struggled badly or been particularly disrespectful, maybe, that you have that time afterwards, not even perhaps that day, but maybe later on that week, where you spend some time actually repairing the relationship so that, you know, you both feel better about it and we can move forward and start afresh.
And I know, you know, we mentioned before that behaviour is a result of something else, isn't it, normally? And I know you talked a bit about co-regulation before. Would you like to tell me more about that?
Yeah, so co-regulation is really about supporting someone who is dysregulated. So helping them to regulate themselves again. And common dysregulation behaviours could be that shutdown or withdrawal, where you can't get anything out of them at all, no response at all, or it could be very upset, very angry, showing risky behaviours. And actually, by investing that time with them to help them to regulate, using supportive strategies such as deep breathing or distraction techniques, those supports for the next step are really useful. So some of the things that I sometimes like to do is, you know, you think you'll process through aloud. So you might say, oh, I'm wondering whether maybe a drink of water might be really useful for you, or I'm wondering whether you'd like to blow some bubbles, or if I blow bubbles and start to blow bubbles, maybe they'll come along and want to help and slowly get into that regulation. Obviously, co-regulation always works best if it's with your trusted adult. So a conversation starter might often be, who's on your trusted 5? You know, is there someone that I can get? Because they might, the last person they want to see could be me. Staying in the room is not going to help them. However, if they can say, I'd like to speak to so-and-so, I can go and get them, and then we can start that process again. It's about demonstrating that clear and calm manner that then makes them begin to regulate themselves. And I think think there's a really good example that I did recently with a young man who was really struggling. He was really angry. And actually, I think he was almost looking for me to be scared of him as well. And I sat on the floor and, you know, he was going about the room in a real temper. And I had a bouncy ball randomly in my pocket, as most teachers will be able to associate with the amount of random things you find in your pocket. And I just started bouncing it and catching it myself, bouncing it and catching it, and eventually rolled it to him. He rolled it back to me. And before we knew it, he was calming down. And actually then I was beginning to talk to him and he was engaging. And the whole process probably lasted about 20 minutes. But in that 20 minutes, there was so much information that came out of that time. You know, as he calmed down, he could talk about why he felt angry in the first place. He talked about home, talked about all manner of different things. And I came away feeling like I had a lot of tools to support him in the future. So it's a good experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thank you. So thinking as your role with many hats, but mainly your safeguarding hat, well, it's all working together really, isn't it? So what are your like top 3 non-negotiables when it comes to safeguarding?
Yeah, so that's really a challenging question, isn't it? Because it does depend on who you're thinking about, whether it's your top 3 for DSLs or top 3 for staff in school. Obviously, it comes back to what we were talking about around training and regular training, but actually it's probably more than that. It's the day-to-day bread and butter that makes safeguarding a culture within your school. So I suppose in thinking about top 3, I would say it's keeping your ears and your eyes open at all times. Safeguarding concerns quite often come up when you're least expecting it. So probably when children have got their heads down, they're working, but they're quietly talking to the person next to them, it's keeping one ear to the ground. Those playground and corridor conversations are so important, because as we know, number 2, safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. So just because they're not in your class, make sure that you're listening at all times. You know, those little snatched conversations could be the piece of the jigsaw that the class teacher has been waiting for. So making sure it's a shared responsibility. And the last one, I think, is assuming that it is probably happening in your setting. I think that there's quite a lot of times where people can think, oh, well, I work at a nice school, or we have nice families, and that sort of thing. We don't need to learn about that, or I don't need to go on that training because that's not going to happen to me, or I work in primary, I don't work in secondary. And actually, if we all assume that it is happening, then we can be prepared better for what might lie ahead, and actually supporting our other colleagues as well.
You're absolutely right with that last one, 100%. You know, it happens everywhere. In every school, there'll be safeguarding issues, concerns, scenarios that will happen. And just because you haven't heard about them doesn't mean it isn't going on, isn't it? And getting those key messages. No, that's great. Thank you. Now, Jamie, who I interviewed earlier, has a question for you. So this is his question for you. Okay, he says, thinking about your individual school, what's the biggest challenge that you face or the school faces in terms of continuous professional development for your staff in regards to safeguarding?
Right, so staffing, that's an interesting one.
So CPD for your staff around safeguarding, what are the challenges?
I think the challenge is time. I think that if I asked my staff how they felt about safeguarding, I think that they would say that they take it very seriously. But I think that they would say it's the time to actually invest in further CPD around safeguarding. We have done online safety training with all of our staff this year, but I think that would be a really big area that could be looked into in much more depth. when we think sometimes, especially in a primary school, what's online safety about? It's thinking about, you know, your typical resources around, oh, you know, don't click on that link, or don't look at that pop-up or something like that. But actually it's so much deeper than that, especially in the age of social media and phones, WhatsApp groups and so on and so forth. And I think that actually there's an awful lot that could be unpicked. So I think that that would be an area that I would like to develop a lot more in terms of CPD.
Yeah, but if the staff are wanting to, but it's just finding the time to do so. So you're halfway there.
Yep, definitely halfway there.
So what would your question be for our next guest?
So my question would be, how do you ensure that all governors are up to date and confident with all safeguarding training?
Oh, that's a very good question. I like it. Thank you. I will pass it on to our next one. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time today. Lots of useful information that I know people will take away and use within their school. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hi, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you could all do me a favour and just click that subscribe button, that would be great. Thanks, bye.